everyone, welcome back to Effective English Learning. I'm Mia.
And I'm James. Great to have you here today.
James, I'm going to say a sentence, and I want you to tell me what's strange about it. My car was stolen last night.
Ooh, a good one. What's interesting is you never say who stole it. The thief has completely vanished from the sentence.
Exactly. The car is the star, and the criminal is nowhere to be found. And that little magic trick has a name, the passive voice.
The passive voice. And I know, the moment we say grammar, some people want to run away.
Please don't run, because here's the truth. You already understand the passive. You hear it every single day, in the news, at work, in restaurants.
You really do. The road is closed. Breakfast is served until 10. Your order has been shipped. All passive, all completely normal, all around you.
So this isn't some rare fancy grammar. It's ordinary, everyday English.
Wonderfully ordinary. So today we're not going to make it complicated. We'll show you what the passive really is, the simple recipe to build it, when to use it, and just as importantly, when not to.
So by the end, people won't just recognize the passive, they'll be able to use it on purpose.
Use it with confidence and sound more natural and more professional when they do, especially in writing and at work.
And I promise everyone, we'll keep it in plain, friendly English with lots of examples you can copy.
Examples you can steal and use tomorrow. That's the whole idea.
So if grammar has ever made your head spin, stay with us. This one's gonna feel easy.
And no, there won't be a test at the end.
Never. Just clear, usable English. Let's get into it.
So let's meet that sentence with no hero. Here we go.
Before we dive in, if you enjoy these chats, please tap subscribe. It's free, and it helps more learners find us.
And a quick like really does help. Thank you. It means the world to us.
So, James, to understand the passive, we first need its partner, the active. What's the difference?
It's all about who is doing the action. In an active sentence, the doer comes first. The chef cooked the meal. The chef, the doer, is the star.
And the passive flips that?
It turns it around. The meal was cooked by the chef. Now the meal comes first and the chef moves to the back. Same event, but the spotlight is moved.
Amazing. So the passive takes the thing that received the action and makes it the star.
And that's a genuinely useful power. Some days the thing that was done is what everyone cares about, not the person who did it.
So the passive lets me point the sentence at whatever actually matters.
Beautifully put. In the active, the doer is the hero. In the passive, the receiver is the hero. The dog chased the cat, active. The cat was chased by the dog, passive.
So it's the same story, just told from the other side.
Exactly the same event, a different camera angle. And that's the key idea. The passive isn't about changing what happened, it's about what you point the camera at.
So why would I want to move the camera off the doer?
Lots of reasons, and we'll cover them all. Sometimes you don't know who did it. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes the receiver is simply the more important part. The passive gives you that choice.
So it's not a rule I'm forced to follow. It's a tool I get to choose.
A tool, exactly. One that good speakers and writers reach for on purpose. Now let's learn how to build one.
Yes, give me the recipe.
It's simpler than you'd ever expect.
Okay, the recipe. How do I actually make a passive sentence?
Just two ingredients, the verb to be plus the past participle of your main verb. That's it. Be plus past participle.
And the past participle, remind everyone what that is.
It's the third form of a verb. For regular verbs, it's the ed form. Cook becomes cooked, clean becomes cleaned. For irregular ones, you learn them. Eat, ate, eaten, take, took, taken, write, wrote, written.
So eaten, taken, written, those third forms are the passive ingredient.
Exactly, and you already know dozens of them. Every time you've said, I've eaten or it's broken, you've used a participle without thinking.
So I've been half building passives for years without even realizing it.
Exactly. So watch it build. Take the dog eats the food, active. Now, be plus participle. The food is eaten, passive, simple.
The food is eaten. So is the be part and eaten is the participle.
Perfect. Let's do one more slowly. Active. They clean the office every day. Passive. The office is cleaned every day. The office moves to the front, is appears, clean becomes cleaned.
And the by them, where did the doer go?
You can add it, by them, but often you just drop it because nobody cares who cleans the office, and that's the beauty. The office is cleaned every day. Clean, natural, done.
So the whole recipe really is just be plus the third form of the verb.
That's the entire secret. Every passive sentence in English in every tense is just some form of be plus a past participle. Master those two ingredients and you've mastered the passive.
So the only tricky part is knowing my past participles.
That's the real homework, honestly. Learn your irregular participles and the passive becomes easy. Now, let's talk about when you'd actually reach for it.
Yes, the why. What do people really use this?
Let's start with the most common reason of all.
The most common reason, what is it?
When you don't know who did the action or when it simply doesn't matter. That's when the passive shines.
Give me the don't know version first.
Back to your car. My car was stolen. You don't know who the thief is, so you can't name them. The passive lets you talk about the event without knowing the doer. Very handy.
So the passive is perfect for mysteries, a crime with no known criminal.
The passive is the language of the whodunit. The jewels were stolen. By whom? That's the whole mystery.
So every detective story is quietly full of passive sentences.
Exactly. The window was broken. My bike was taken. The message was deleted. Something happened, and the doer is unknown. The passive tells the story anyway.
Curious. And the don't care version?
That's even more common. This bridge was built in 1890. Do you care about the individual builders' names? Not really. The bridge is the point. So the workers quietly disappear, and that's fine.
So when the doer is boring or obvious, the passive politely removes them.
Politely removes them. I love that. English is spoken here. The results will be announced tomorrow. Nobody needs to know exactly who speaks or who announces. The action is what matters.
So it keeps the sentence clean by cutting out the parts nobody needs.
It tidies the sentence. And there's a third case, when you'd rather not say who did it. Mistakes were made. Notice, no one takes the blame. Politicians adore that sentence.
Mistakes were made, the most guilty, innocent sentence in English.
Beautifully guilty. So don't know, don't care, or don't want to say. 3 perfect reasons to go passive.
Don't know, don't care, don't want to say. That's easy to remember.
Now, let's make sure you can do this in any tense, not just the present.
Quick reminder before we go on, if this is helping, drop a comment with the word passive. We read every one and it tells us to keep making these.
Just one word, passive. Go on, we'll see it.
So the passive in different tenses, this is where people usually panic. Is it hard?
It looks scary and it's genuinely easy because only one thing changes. The past participle stays exactly the same. You just change the be.
So I only ever change be and the participle never moves?
Never moves. Let's take one verb, make, and one thing, the cake, and travel through time. Present. The cake is made, just is.
And the past?
The cake was made. Is becomes was. That's the only change. Future. The cake will be made. Present perfect. The cake has been made. Hear it? Made, made, made. The participle never changes. Only be shifts.
Oh, that's such a relief. I was expecting 5 different scary forms.
Everyone is, and it's just one small word doing the work. It is cleaned. It was cleaned. It will be cleaned. It has been cleaned. It is being cleaned right now.
So if I can change be through the tenses, which I already can, then I can already do the passive in every tense.
You already have every tool you need. You've known how to say is, was, will be, has been for years. Add a participle, and the passive is yours across all of time.
Is there any tense where the passive sounds a bit clumsy?
Good ear, yes. The perfect continuous, like has been being made, sounds awful. And native speakers avoid it. So don't worry about the ugly corners. The everyday tenses are the ones you need.
So I focus on the common tenses and skip the clumsy ones.
Exactly. Keep it natural. Now, that little word we keep dropping, let's give it a moment.
The little word by. When do we actually use it?
You use by when you do want to mention the doer because they matter. It reintroduces the person or thing that did the action.
So when does the doer matter enough to keep?
When the doer is surprising, important, or the whole point. This painting was painted by a child. That's fascinating. The doer is the interesting part, so you keep them with by.
Oh, so by is for when the doer is too good to throw away.
Beautifully said. The novel was written by her grandmother. The bridge was designed by a famous engineer. Here, the doer adds real value, so by earns its place.
So the rule is simple. Drop the doer when they're boring, keep them with by when they're interesting.
That's the whole art of it. And a very common learner mistake is adding by when you don't need it. The office is cleaned by cleaners. Well, of course it is. Who else? So just say, the office is cleaned.
The office is cleaned by cleaners. That's a bit silly, isn't it?
A little. If the doer is obvious, by just adds clutter. Keep it only when it tells us something we'd actually want to know.
So most of the time the doer just stays hidden.
Most of the time, yes. In everyday passive sentences, the by part is dropped far more often than it's kept. Only bring it in when the doer earns the spotlight.
Keep by for the interesting doers. Got it.
Now, let's go and hear where the passive really lives in real life.
So where does the passive actually turn up most? Where should I listen for it?
4 big places. First, the news. Reporters love the passive. 3 people were injured. A decision has been made. The suspect was arrested. It sounds neutral and official.
So the news is basically a river of passive sentences.
And now that you know why, you'll spot it in the very first headline you read today. The doer is often simply missing.
So the news teaches me the passive for free every single day.
A steady stream of them. Second, science and instructions. The water is heated to 100 degrees. The samples were tested. In science, the doer doesn't matter. The process does. Perfect passive territory.
And the third place?
Business and formal writing, especially emails. Your request has been received. The report will be sent on Friday. Payment is required within 30 days. It sounds professional and a little more polite and distant.
And I imagine that distance is sometimes exactly what you want at work.
Very much so. A mistake was made in the invoice feels far gentler than you made a mistake. The passive softens the blame. Nobody's pointed at directly. That's a real, useful, human skill.
So the passive can be a polite diplomatic tool, not just a grammar rule.
One of its best uses, honestly. And the fourth place, signs and public notices. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Shoplifters will be reported. Breakfast is served from 7. Short, official, everywhere.
So once I start listening for it, I'll hear it constantly.
You won't be able to unhear it. News, science, formal emails, and signs. Start noticing the passive there, and you'll learn it faster than any textbook could teach you.
So my homework is really just listen and notice.
Notice it in the wild. Now, let's fix the mistakes learners make most.
Okay, the common mistakes. Let's save people some embarrassment.
The number one mistake, forgetting the be. Learners say the car's stolen or the office cleaned every day, but without be, it's not a real sentence.
So the car was stolen needs that was to hold it together.
Think of be as the little engine of the passive. Without it, the sentence just sits there, unable to move.
So no be, no passive. That's a simple thing to check.
The be is the glue. The car was stolen. The office is cleaned. Never drop it. That little be is doing essential work.
Curious, what's the second mistake?
Animation. Using the past simple instead of the past participle. Learners say the window was broke, but it's broken. Broke is the past simple. Broken is the participle. The passive always wants the second one.
So was broke should be was broken. Was took should be was taken.
Exactly right. And that's why learning your irregular participles pays off so much. Broke versus broken. Took versus taken. Wrote versus written. The passive always takes the second one.
Curious, and is there a third common slip?
Yes, making the passive when there's nothing receiving the action. Some verbs can't go passive at all. You can't say was happened or was arrived. The accident happened. That's it. It stays active.
So verbs like happen and arrived simply refuse to be passive.
They refuse politely but firmly. A quick test. If a verb doesn't do something to an object, it usually can't be passive. Sleep, happen, arrive, come. They just stay active.
So keep the be, use the participle, and don't force verbs that can't do it.
You've just summarized 3 lessons in 1 sentence. That's the whole minefield, safely crossed.
So now I can build it correctly, but should I use it all the time?
And that's the most important lesson of all.
Don't overdo it, so the passive can be too much.
Very much so. This is the lesson people never get taught. The passive is a lovely tool, but if you use it everywhere, your English becomes heavy, cold, and hard to read.
So more passive isn't better English.
Rarely. Learners sometimes think the passive sounds cleverer, so they overuse it, and their writing quietly turns stiff and cold.
So trying to sound advanced can actually make me harder to read.
Often the opposite. Good, clear, everyday English is mostly active. I made a mistake is stronger, warmer, and braver than a mistake was made. The active voice is direct, the passive is distant.
So the active sounds more human, and the passive more official.
Perfectly put. So here's the golden rule. Use the active by default and reach for the passive on purpose when you have a real reason. Don't know the doer, don't care, want to be diplomatic, or the receiver is the point.
So the passive is the special tool, not the everyday one.
Exactly. Think of it like a spice, not the main meal. A little passive in the right place makes your English richer and more professional. Too much and the whole thing tastes strange.
So the skill isn't just building the passive, it's knowing when to leave it alone.
That's the mark of a really good speaker. Anyone can learn the recipe, the art is choosing the right moment to use it.
So I stay mostly active and sprinkle the passive in with intention.
Mostly active, passive, with purpose. Get that balance and you'll sound natural and polished at the very same time.
That's such a freeing way to think about grammar, as choices, not chains.
Grammar is a set of tools, not a cage. Now, let's gather it all up.
All right, let's pull it all together. James, first, what is the passive voice?
It's when the receiver of the action becomes the star of the sentence. The chef cooked the meal becomes the meal was cooked. Same event, different camera angle.
And the recipe to build it?
Just 2 ingredients, the verb be plus the past participle. The office is cleaned. To change tense, you only change be. Is, was, will be, has been. The participle never moves.
And when do we actually use it?
When you don't know the doer, don't care about the doer, or don't want to name the doer. And you add by only when the doer is genuinely interesting, painted by a child.
And where do we hear it most?
Well, the news, science and instructions, formal emails, and public signs. Listen for it there and it'll teach itself to you.
And the big mistakes to avoid?
Don't drop the be. Don't use the past simple where you need the participle, broken, not broke. And don't force verbs like happen or arrive into the passive. And above all, don't overdo it. Stay mostly active and use the passive on purpose.
And the one big idea if you forget everything else?
The passive is a tool, not a rule. Be plus the past participle used when the doer doesn't matter. A spice, not the whole meal.
So here's our challenge for you today, and we really do read every comment.
Turn this active sentence into the passive and write it below. Someone cleans this room every day. Give it a go, and we'll cheer you on.
And if this helped, a like, a subscribe, and a share with a friend who's wrestling with grammar would mean the world to us.
So listen for the passive today, try building 1 or 2, and remember,
it's not a rule to fear, it's a tool to enjoy. See you next time.
Bye everyone.